this is Rosalie with the Wichita Falls Public Library. I'm going to be leading us through our craft along for today. We're going to be making fall pumpkins out of recycled sweaters. They're very cute. They can be as many different sizes and colors as you want, and it's a no-sew project that's really good for beginners. For today's craft, you're just going to need an old sweater that you don't care about, some polyfill or some scrap fabric to stuff it with, some extra yarn, and a stick or some dowel rods. Your tools are going to be scissors, a hot glue gun, a darning needle, that one's optional, and rubber bands, 2 very small ones. So grab your supplies and let's get started. Okay, so this is my old sweater that I don't care about anymore, so I'm going to be cutting the sleeves off of it for the pumpkins first. So we've got both of our sleeves cut off. You don't have to be very careful with it because it's going to be mostly hidden as far as any of the frayed edges go. And this will be enough for at least 4 pumpkins. We're just going to make 1 on the camera today. I'm also keeping the rest of the body of it and cutting up a little bit to fill it since I don't have any polyfill. I have some extra fabric from the sweater for stuffing. Now all you have to do to get started is decide kind of how big you want your pumpkin to be, how tall you want it to be, and cut off that bit of the sleeve. So see, I'm making mine kind of small for this round. You can get at least 2 pumpkins out of each sleeve, maybe 3 depending on how big you're making them. And you want to start with them right side in because we're going to be using a rubber band to seal it first. So I've got mine wrong side out, right side in. All you got to do is take a little rubber band and scrunch up one end. Better yet, I'm going to scrunch up the frayed ends because this is going to be the bottom of the pumpkin. So now I've seen people suggest using a clear rubber band, but most of the, you're not going to be able to see the rubber bands when you're completely done, so it really doesn't matter. So I've got my rubber band around the end, and then I'm just going to flip it inside out. Now we're going to have the right side out. So now that we have that, you just want to start stuffing. You're going to use, again, polyfill or scrap fabric and just work it in there. You'll make it basically as full as you want it. If you're using scrap fabric, even if you're using polyfill really, you'll want to work the stuffing around so that it's not very lumpy. And that just takes a little bit of finessing. So now I've got mine filled. It's a tiny bit lumpy, but that extra step that I'm talking about with the darning needle could fix that, so stick around for that. I've got it pretty much completely full and it's right side out. So you just take the top after you're done with that. Grab your second rubber band. Don't make your rubber band too tight because you're going to be stuffing some things into the top of this. Okay, so now we've got a little sweater ball. Now, for the stick part, I'm just going to be shoving a few dowel rods in there. And I will warn you, with scrap fabric, if you're not cutting it up into very small pieces, this part is going to be pretty hard to do, so you're having to work it in there. With polyfill, it's a lot easier. Okay, so if you have a darning needle, which is just a pretty large needle with a very big eye, and it's not always sharp, it's going to be, look for darning or tapestry needles, and it'll have a pretty blunt end. So all you want to do is grab some yarn. This can be, close to the same color like I'm doing. It can be really dark if you've got a light colored sweater, really light if you've got a dark colored sweater, or a contrasting color if you're comfortable with the color wheel. Not too much, about this much string. Tie a knot at one end. And depending on the knit of your sweater, you might want to make it a double or a triple knot. We are just going to thread our needle. This part might be tricky. The needle I have isn't the largest of darning needles, so make sure you get one that has a very large eye to it so that the yarn will fit through it very easy. But I managed. So now we got us a lumpy pumpkin. Looks more like a ball. What we're going to do with the darning needle is give it some of those ridges like pumpkins have. So take your needle and you're going to go through the very bottom where that rubber band is, and try not to lose your needle as you push it through to the top. You can squish your pumpkin so you get a better idea of what it's going to be like. I will also strongly suggest a longer needle, but I think we're going to manage today. There we are. And since I'm having to kind of feel around for it, you really don't want a sharp needle. You want something that's dull and large. So I'm bringing the needle up through the very top, right where the rubber band is. And pulling our string through. So you see it's going to end up being pretty squished. And if you end up having sticks or dowel rods that are too long, we'll cut them off at the end. So we got it pulled from the bottom to the top, and then you're just going to do the same thing and just come up on the opposite side of it instead. So this is the side we came out on. We're going to go through the bottom, squish our pumpkin. Haha. All right, and then when you get about here, make sure you're still staying pretty even. Or lumpy, you can have lumpy pumpkins, that's totally how they come. So, just pull this part tight, not super tight, but pretty tight, and you'll start to get that ridge that pumpkins have. Okay. And then you just want to keep going from the bottom through the top. You can do this as many times as you want, or I'm probably just going to do this about 6 or 8 times since it's a smaller pumpkin. Make sure to keep it pretty taut while you're going along. They have a tendency to loosen up, and you don't want to have very visible yarn. You want it to really kind of sink into it. All right, get your last one positioned. Tight. Pull it pretty tight so that you have a roughly pumpkin shape. And then what you're going to do is wrap this around the base and tie it off. Just a simple knot. It's not going to need to be super perfect. It should hold it up just fine. Also, if you're doing that process and your stick or your dowel rod will not stay in, just take it out. You can put it back in later. Snip it off. Don't worry if there's a little bit of extra there because we're going to be wrapping it after this. I took the dowel rods out while I was sewing because they just were not staying in. And then I realized that they were a little too tall, so I cut them in half. And now this is how I have them set up in there. All relatively the same height, not going to matter too much if it isn't. And then don't cut off the yarn this time because you're going to need a lot of it. You're going to tie it around the base right here. Just tie a little knot around it. And then you just start wrapping. Take your time. You kind of want it to be right along, like you don't want to have any gaps in your string. This will probably be the most time consuming part of this. And this way you can blend up, you can hide the rubber band, you can blend up the fluffy part of the top. If you need to go over a spot because you see a gap, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfectly lined up. If you don't want to do this part and you want a more rustic look, just grab a stick from the backyard. What you can do is tie it off here, or grab your hot glue gun, put a little dot at the top, and then carefully wrap it over the top of that. So we got our little dot of hot glue. You just wrap it around the hot glue too. Be careful not to burn yourself here like I'm doing. Now that it's on there, and there you go. You have a perfect little pumpkin. Okay, so now that you have this finished pumpkin, you can keep it like this, or you can add a couple more details. Like I said, you can use a stick from outside if you want to have a more rustic look. You don't have to wrap it with yarn. And then you can also use scrap fabric to make a little leaf, or wrap a good type of ribbon around it to make a bow, whatever you want to do. I kind of like it just like this, so this is how I'm going to keep it. And there we go, a cute little pumpkin, perfect for November. Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you make one, please post a picture to show us. Thank you!